Lorenzo. Would you close the door? Thank you. And throw the key. Welcome everybody to the 2018 version of the OpenSIPS Summit here in beautiful Amsterdam. We'll be talking about parting gifts a little later in the show. Thank you all for making the effort and getting here. It's nice to see all of the familiar faces and the new faces. We're looking forward to serving you up with some great information, some great presenters. You know some of them you don't, but you'll never forget them. So without further ado, just want to make sure everyone's got their badges, everyone's gotten their gear and checked in. Anyone that hasn't? Great. So let's get it kicked off with Bogdan here with the keynote, and the OpenSIPS Summit 2018 has started.
Thank you, Alex. Let me know this works. That's okay. The sound.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. First of all, I want to say welcome and thank you everyone for being here with us for a new edition of the OpenSIPS Summit. And as usual, I will give you an introduction in what happened lately with OpenSIPS, and that's mainly about the latest 2.4 release. Well, probably you followed the news. Yesterday we switched the 2.4 from beta to the stable release. That was something interesting. We did it actually in here, in this actual room, yesterday afternoon. So the OpenSIPS release and the summit are actually really connected. That's something that we did for the last 3 or 4 years. The OpenSIPS 2.4 is mainly focused on clustering. So for this year, we choose as a flavor for the OpenSIPS to have the clustering, and that's why we have the code name, the cluster maker. There was a lot of work involved in this release for the clustering, covering different verticals or horizontals into the OpenSIPS code base in order to implement it in the proper way. And of course, over each year we are adding more and more features, functionalities to OpenSIPS. So the complexity of OpenSIPS as a software gets higher and higher from day to day. And here comes the dilemma that we are facing each time when we plan something new. The dilemma is the typical complexity versus simplicity, or how easy it is actually to use something. Because we are looking at the complexity of the things you want to do when you use OpenSIPS versus how easy it is for you to actually use it. So all the time we have these two things in balance, and we are looking, okay, which one should be more important than and the others. And I'm mentioning this because along the years, in many cases, many times, OpenSIPS was blamed for actually not being easy to use, because the learning curve is steep. You have to accumulate a lot of information, knowledge. You get to play a lot in order to understand, to get to the level of actually using OpenSIPS. So let's take an example just to understand what I'm trying to say here. Let's imagine, in terms of easiness, how easy it is nowadays for people to drive a car. That's basically something everybody more or less can do, can do it. And the car will typically get you wherever there is a road. So you don't need any kind of particular skills. It's easy to use, and in the same time, the actual goal, the actual scope is quite limited. On the other hand, let's take into consideration trying to fly a space shuttle. In that case, of course, requires a lot of skills, a lot of training. You have to do, learning and so on. But the end, what can you, where a space shuttle can get you comparing to a car. So basically, it's what you want to achieve at the end of the day. You just want to get something easy to use, and in that case you are just limited, let's say, based on our example, to where roads do exist, or you simply want to be able to reach more capabilities, more scenarios by using more and more complex. So at the end of the day, what I want to say is that OpenSIPS by itself doesn't aim necessarily to be an easy one, an easy tool. That's not our goal. In our example, we don't really want to be the car. We want to be the space shuttle. So even if it's complicated and it's getting more and more complex each year, the idea is we want to address more and more complex scenario. We want to be able to get in the most further places. So if we don't want to be easy, in that case, what OpenSIPS wants to be. So what OpenSIPS aims to be in terms of overall project. First of all, we want for our users, generically said users, we want to be a reliable software. Reliable in terms of being predictable, because we learned that with the last 5 or 6 years that we have one release every year around May, that we usually around March we do the beta release. So everything, the whole release cycle, it's well known, predictable. People and companies can build plans based on that. So it's quite easy to use. At the same time, it is reliable in terms of getting help and support. We have a community. We have a lot of channels for for providing information and knowledge. We have IRC channels, emails, also the non-interactive channels like documentation or the blogs and so on. So there are many ways where we help, and of course the community helps all the people in terms of how you can use OpenSIPS, so you know that you'll find the information that you need. And it's not only about the help from the community. Without trying to do any kind of a sales pitch here, there are also companies providing support. So you can find a business service for the support, which is sometimes really important for the company, because when you run platforms, you have millions of customers and so on. Even if you have most of the knowledge in house, you just want to know that somebody can, help you whenever something goes wrong. So you want to have your back covered all the time. So in that case, you can have multiple options in this area. Again, is reliable in terms of software stability, because we do a lot of tests, we do a lot of fixes, so we invest a lot of time in being sure that the OpenSIPS is a robust piece of software. So that's something quite valuable, considering that in most of the cases you want to build services, you want to be happy, customers happy, and at the same time you want to have a good sleep during the night too. Another thing that we want to, what we aim is being a coherent software. That's mainly in terms of the development plan. We are not simply, randomly picking and piling up, let's say, features or functionalities into OpenSIPS. The whole development, even sometimes maybe it's not so transparent for you, but it's quite well planned, even with, let's say, 1 year in advance. For example, we were already talking about what we want to do in the next release, in the 3.0, even before releasing the 2.4. Because in our perspective, everything has to change. They have to make a sense and to be, consistent in terms of development. Just to give you an example, when we started, I don't even remember, like 4 or 5 years ago with the 2.x branch in OpenSIPS, we said, okay, yes, we want to do the major switch. We want to use this internal I/O reactors because we wanted to achieve the asynchronous capabilities. We wanted to have the inter-process communication system that automatically enabled many other features like event-based routing. We have a better way of the module to communicate with the processes and so on. So basically, we made a long-term plan in terms of what needs to be done in order to achieve in a consistent way all the things that we have on the map. So again, maybe all these are not so transparent, for the outside, because I would say these discussions sometimes are long discussions during many weeks in our meetings, trying to discussing, okay, what features do make sense, what's the best approach for doing and how we can connect them, because everything at the end, it's a big like a big puzzle where all the pieces have to come together in order to get again something consistent. And the last but not the least, we are an industry driven, or let's say we are driven by the needs. In this, that means that whatever we do in OpenSIPS is based on the feedback or on the needs of the community. We are looking on, okay, what makes sense or not. We are not just implementing things just to be proud of them and just to be there. No, we are just looking to address the real needs of the people using OpenSIPS. So basically, we want to provide real solutions for the real problems. So that's why such events like the summit or all the discussions. So we learn a lot in the discussions on the mailing list. Talking to the people, we learn, okay, what are the actual needs, what maybe is missing in OpenSIPS, and incorporate all this in the development plan. Again, in order to have an consistent development. But the idea is, at the end of the day, why we build OpenSIPS is because we want to be used in whatever crazy or complex scenarios you may have. It's not, it's not a hobby. We are just want to have, a really powerful piece of software. So, going back to the OpenSIPS 2.4 release, as I said, we are mainly focused on the clustering support, and this clustering was addressed on the full vertical in the OpenSIPS code. That means we started from the lowest possible level, from the transport layer, looking on how what we need in actually to build the intercommunication between the nodes, then what we need in order to manage the topology of a cluster, because even before getting to the upper layer where you can say, yeah, I have a cluster and I put a functionality on top of it, like, I don't know, I'm distributing registrations, you actually need to have a really powerful clustering engine. And probably half of the efforts we did for this in this release was focused on how to build a powerful clustering engine with different kind of capabilities, synchronizing passing data between, being able to share states between us, being able to detect and broken links inside the cluster and reroute and so on. So once we addressed this part, you know, what we call the full vertical in terms of clustering, we moved on, and on the top level we addressed the whole horizontal in terms of which functionalities we're going to use this the clustering. So before moving forward, I just want to be sure that whenever we say clustering, keep in mind that clustering actually it's more than simply sharing the data, because sometimes that's a quite common mistake. Clustering, it's more about the ability of multiple nodes to work together as a whole and to provide the same consistent experience on all the nodes. Because you may say that, okay, there was some basic capability of sharing some data before, but they were quite limited, it was kind of a stateless, if I can say so, data sharing. So on the top level, when it comes to clustering, we addressed registrations, and here we have different models on how you can distribute or share registrations. We have different approaches with doing a federated approach, or full sharing of the data, and user location is registration. Sorry, it's even it's more complex than actually simply sharing registration as a piece of data, because you have to keep you have to take into consideration all the constraints that you may have from the user agent client side. You may have devices registering via, let's say, TCP, so you are bound to a specific connection. You may have registering through the NAT, so again you are bound to a certain IP to reach back the customer, the device, and so on. So there are many constraints coming from the IP and SIP level in terms of how you can actually distribute this registration. And then to make things even more complicated, you have to address together the load balancing or data sharding eventually, and high availability together in order to say, yes, I have a cluster that can scale, and then it's redundant in terms of data. So even if we have there only one single bullet like registration, there is a lot of work, and there will be more presentations during these days in details about how this works. But the idea is behind there is quite an entire ecosystem in terms of what you can do and possible solutions that you can achieve with this registration clustering. Then we have the clustering for the ongoing calls. Basically the ability to build high available solutions for calls. And again, this is more than simply sharing the call status, because something like that was possible even before just basic replication of call status. In a clustering scenario for the calls, we look also on what kind of actions can be triggered by the ongoing calls. So basically kind of a management of the calls in terms of which node in the cluster is responsible for a certain node. Because you may have a node, let's say, distributed on 3 or 4 nodes, but if the call gives you timeout, the question, okay, which node will actually generate the event? Which node will actually send the buy request? Which node will actually generate the CDR for the call? Again, considering that the data is shared, so any node may legitimately do that. And when it comes to which node, you have to look also at you have to address also the failover, because nodes may come up and down. So it's a tricky thing that you have to do in terms of deciding, okay, who's doing certain actions over the call. And to make more things more complicated as scenarios for the ongoing calls. So besides the simple high availability scenarios, we have addressed the full Anycast support for the ongoing calls. Actually the ability of having multiple OpenSIPS boxes working together, sharing not only at dialogue level but also the transaction layer, sharing the state of the ongoing calls, considering again that you may have multiple active boxes because of an Anycast setup. So you can have a call, getting an invite on a box. You can have, let's say, the cancel or the reply on a different machine depending on the Anycast switching between the boxes. And all these are addressed in a full way in the 2.4. We have the clustering for the presence part, again, typical, similar to the registrations, with a federating approach where you have a lot of data being shared. For the presence itself, just take into consideration that presence by itself, it's a quite heavy using service in terms of they are large piece of data involving presence, so sometimes sharding of data is necessary, so that's why we look into doing rather like a federated system, and at the same time to have high availability. And an interesting clustering capability is the custom functions at the script level. So basically we exposed at the scripting level some primitives from the clustering, like the ability of communicating with the nodes, the ability to receive messages from the nodes, so inter-cluster communication at the script level. So you have the liberty to actually implement your own custom, let's say, scenario directly at the script level if you exposed all this for the script. But again, all these topics will be in depth addressed during the summit. In the presentations, in the third day we have demos, and of course the training in the last day, which is actually focused only on how to do the clustering. And because we talked about the consistent development, let's take a look on what we actually plan for the next release. And because of the changes we plan, we want to move to the 3.x. So the 2 point was mainly addressed, mainly focused on the asynchronous and the reactor things, the IO reactor. And now in the 3.x branch, we want to focus more on scripting. We want to do a lot of rework for the variables in the script, to have a clear separation between the scope of a variable, like where it's available, what you can do with it, versus the data type, so what kind of data the variable can contain, because right now it's a kind of a big mixing between all of these. Also, there is a rework of the interfaces, the management interface, event interface, to have a clear separation between what's actually the transport layer versus how the data is encoded. The plan right now, I'm not sure that will be the final one, but the plan is to support only JSON encoding for whatever transport you may have. So currently, like you have the FIFO, you have datagram, you have MI JSON. All of them actually will rely in terms of data encoding on JSON. The rest of them would be just simple transport, just to use as a transport protocol. So that in that case, integration of OpenSIPS would be much easier, because now you'll have a standard. It would be also much easier to extend with new transports and so on. So we will do a bit of a cleanup. And also in terms of scripting, we'd want to do the script restructuring, because one of the main goals of the 3.x is to be able to do the script reload. And for that, at runtime, of course. And for that, we need quite a huge restructuring of how the script interpreter and all the functions to work, because right now everything is based on kind of a static approach. But the goal is to separate configuration in terms of module parameters versus the actual routing script. So at the runtime point, anytime you can reload your routing script without the need of shutting down, because in many cases in production environments, a full restart is sometimes mission impossible, because you have a lot of data to cache. You have to restart. You don't want to have even like a couple of seconds of downtime. So if you just want to change one line in the script, that will be fine. You just do a reload. There will be zero impact in terms of traffic and so on. So that's what we plan. And again, everything is about coherent development, trying to chain the things and put them together as a big puzzle. So at the end, you will get something which is fully integrated. So that's why this current development is so important to us. And just to understand why we press it so much is, again, in the last minute, let's take a short example. Looking at the typical, let's say, issue of our days, like cities development. And the problem is, that we are more and more people on this planet. We need more and more houses. And probably, when you want to provide houses, the easiest approach is, just fast piling up houses and, provide quickly a place for people to live. And if you do that, you get a fast solution. It's a solution that you have right now, but you may end up with something like that. Everybody start building, putting stuff together without any kind of planning. So you may have the second approach, where you invest more in planning, you invest more in what we call an infrastructure for building things. And again, if we reference to a city, you may end up in a completely different direction. So even if it's slower in terms of initial moment, because you have to invest more, again, infrastructure, you have to build transportation, you have to build facilities, utilities, and all this. This may give you a slow start, but in the same time, you may say that at a certain moment in time you have the same number of inhabitants in those cases. But if you look in the future, the question is, which one will be able to grow, organically grow? Because definitely something that relies on an infrastructure can theoretically, indefinitely scale and, let's say, evolve in terms of capabilities. You can add anytime, let's say, new services. You may want to add parks, you may want to add shops and so on. While the other one is completely unmanageable. It may be a simple solution, on the spot, just put things together. But the idea is you need to make them work together in a coherent way. So that's basically what we want to do. So everything is based on the planning. Sometimes, again, there's a lot of work that we do inside, so it may not be visible, but the idea is we want to get a growing city in terms of how OpenSIPS evolves. Thank you. Again, that was a brief description of how we see the things, how we work on the project. Probably we don't have time for the questions because I was a bit
Hold on a
late.
second. That's my job, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
I'm not just here to be your pretty face. Okay.
Okay, so that's the second mistake, right? So I was late and then I got into your space. Sorry.
Just don't let it happen again. Thank you, Bogdan. And we've got Eric Tam coming up, and he'll be giving us some. Stop wiggling your thing in it. We do have 2 minutes for one question. Does somebody have one? Throw them hands up. Hold on. Which one am I going to pick? Look at that. You were quite complete in providing information, Bogdan. Well done.